She grabbed him by the collar. Maya Solari, CEO, philanthropist, the most powerful woman in that ballroom, shoved a janitor against the wall with both hands and screamed directly into his face. "Stay away from my daughter. Don't you ever touch her again." The music stopped. Every head turned. And Noah Carter, mop still in his hand, chest heaving, eyes red, said nothing. Because what could he say? She was the most important person in the room, and he was nobody. But here's what nobody in that ballroom knew yet. He was the only one who had actually saved her little girl. Drop a comment right now. What city are you watching from? I read every single one. And if this story hits home, hit subscribe, because this one goes all the way. Noah Carter had learned a long time ago that the best way to survive in a room full of rich people was to make himself disappear. Not literally. He was 6'2", broad shoulders, dark skin, work boots that scuffed the marble floor no matter how carefully he walked. He couldn't exactly blend into the wallpaper. But there was an art to invisibility that had nothing to do with size. You kept your eyes down. You moved along the edges. You emptied the trash without making eye contact. You refilled the hand sanitizer station without being asked. You existed in the negative space of a room, the parts that people looked past, not at. Noah had been doing it for 11 years, first at the office complex on Wacker Drive, then at the hospital on the south side. Now, for the past 2 years, at Solari Enterprises, and tonight, at whatever this was. The gala. He still wasn't entirely sure what it was raising money for. The banner above the entrance had said something about children's foundations and educational equity, which struck him as ironic given that a single bottle of the wine being poured at the bar cost more than he made in a week. But that was none of his business. His business was the floors, the bathrooms, the service corridors, the invisible infrastructure that kept an event like this running without the guests ever having to think about it. He pushed his cart through the side entrance at 5:47 p.m., a full hour before the doors opened, and got to work. By the time the guests started arriving, Noah had already swept the main hall twice, replaced 3 broken soap dispensers in the men's room, and taped down a corner of the red carpet that had started to peel up near the entrance. The kind of thing that could send a woman in heels straight to the floor and turn a charity gala into a lawsuit. He'd noticed it without being asked, fixed it without being thanked. That was the job. He positioned himself near the east wall with his cart, half hidden behind a column, watching the room fill. The guests came in waves, older men in tuxedos, with the stiff, slightly uncomfortable posture of people who'd worn formal clothes too many times to enjoy them anymore. Women draped in jewelry that caught the light like small explosions. Young executives who laughed too loudly and checked their phones even as they shook hands. The room smelled like cologne and champagne and old money. Noah watched them all without judgment. He'd been watching rooms like this for years, and had long since stopped feeling bitterness about the distance between their world and his. Bitterness was expensive. He couldn't afford it. What he could afford was observation. And one thing he'd noticed, over years of working events like this, was that the people who looked the most in control were usually the ones working the hardest to hold it together. He spotted her the moment she walked in. Maya Solari entered the ballroom the way people enter rooms when they've been doing it their whole lives. Like the room was already waiting for her. Like gravity worked slightly differently in her vicinity. She was maybe 40, 42, with a kind of polished composure that came not from ease, but from discipline. Dark blazer over a silk blouse, hair pinned back, not a strand out of place. She smiled and extended her hand to the first cluster of guests she encountered, and even from across the room, Noah could see the precision in it. The warmth that was real enough to be convincing, but controlled enough to never tip over into vulnerability. She was used to being watched. She performed it well. But there was something else. Walking 2 steps behind her, half hidden by her shadow, was a little girl. 9, maybe 10, small for her age. She wore a dress that was clearly expensive and clearly uncomfortable, the stiff kind that didn't move right when you moved, and she walked with her shoulders drawn up high and tight, like she was bracing for something. Her eyes moved fast, scanning the room in quick, jerky arcs. Not curious, searching, like she was looking for an exit. Noah had seen that look before. Not on a child in a ballroom. On his son, Max. At a birthday party 3 years ago, before they figured out what was going on. Before they had words for it. He watched the girl and felt something quiet settle into his chest. Ari? Maya's voice was low, precise, the way you speak to someone you're trying not to embarrass in public. Ari, come here. I need you to stand next to me while I speak to Mr. Hargrove. The girl, Ari, didn't move. She'd stopped walking about 6 feet from her mother and was standing very still in the middle of the foot traffic, people flowing around her on both sides. Her hands were pressed flat against her thighs. Her jaw was tight. Ariana, a little more edge in it now. The music is loud, Ari said. She didn't say it like a complaint. She said it like a fact, like she was reporting something her mother had failed to notice. I know, sweetheart. It's a party. Music is... It's too loud. Mom? The last word landed differently. Not angry. Frightened. Maya glanced sideways. 2 men in tuxedos were watching. She smiled at them quickly, then turned back to her daughter. We talked about this. We talked about what tonight would be like. You said you could handle it. I thought I could. Ari, I thought I could, Ari said again, and this time her voice cracked slightly at the edges. I was wrong. Can we go somewhere quiet, even for a few minutes? I can't step out right now. The presentation starts in 40 minutes, and I have to be here when... Mom, please. Noah watched Maya Solari's face do something complicated. Something that had nothing to do with the CEO and everything to do with the mother. A flash of real pain crossed it, raw and fast and gone in an instant, replaced by the practiced composure. 5 minutes, Maya said quietly. I'll have someone take you to the hallway. There's a quieter room near the coat check. I don't want to go with someone else. I want you to come with me. Ari, I can't. Then I'll just stand here. And she did. She stood there, completely still, hands flat on her thighs, while the gala moved and buzzed and glittered around her. Noah went back to work. He wasn't supposed to be watching. He had bathrooms to check. A spill someone had reported near the East Bar. A stack of linens that needed moving to the service corridor before the kitchen staff came through. He had a list and a clock, and a supervisor who'd be checking in at 8. He did his rounds. He came back. Ari was still standing in the same spot. But now the music had gotten louder. Someone had adjusted the speakers, the bass filling in, and the crowd around her had thickened. More guests, more voices, more of everything. And the girl's stillness had changed quality. It wasn't controlled anymore. It was frozen. Her hands were no longer flat. They were pressed hard against her ears. Hey! A woman nearby had noticed and was leaning down slightly, speaking to Ari with the careful, slightly patronizing tone that adults use with children they don't know. "Are you lost, honey? Do you need help finding your—" Ari flinched away from the woman like the words had been a physical thing. She stepped back, bumped into a man behind her, spun, and the sound that came out of her wasn't a cry exactly. It was something more fundamental than that. Distress in its purest form. The man she'd bumped into took a quick step back. "Whoa! What's wrong with her?" someone said. "Is she having a— Where's her parents?" Noah was already moving. He didn't run. You didn't run at an event like this. Running meant emergency, and emergency meant attention. And attention was the last thing this child needed right now. He moved fast but smooth, cutting through the crowd with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd spent years navigating tight spaces without disturbing anything. He reached her before anyone else could get closer. He didn't touch her. He didn't speak. He just positioned himself between her and the cluster of people who'd gathered, creating a wall with his body. And then he crouched down, slowly, deliberately, until he was at her level. Her eyes were squeezed shut. Her hands were still pressed to her ears. She was rocking, the smallest possible movement, back and forth, a rhythm her body had found on its own to survive what was happening to it. Noah had seen this before, not in a ballroom, in his living room, and at a grocery store, and once, memorably, at a school concert that had lasted exactly 4 minutes and 30 seconds before Max had hit the floor. He knew what not to do. Don't touch without warning. Don't speak loudly. Don't try to stop the rocking. The rocking was helping her. Don't flood her with information. Don't make it worse by trying to make it better too fast. He also knew what sometimes helped. He started to rock. Slow, matching her rhythm exactly. Back and forth. Back and forth. He kept his hands loose at his sides. He kept his eyes soft, not staring. He just matched her. A mirror. A presence that wasn't demanding anything. Someone behind him said something. He ignored it. 30 seconds passed. Maybe a minute. Ari's eyes opened. Just a crack. She registered him. Really registered him. Not as a threat or a stranger or an adult with an agenda, but as something else. Something unfamiliar in the best possible way. He kept rocking. Her hands came down an inch from her ears. That was when Maya Solari pushed through the crowd. She took in the scene in half a second. Her daughter on the verge of collapse. A janitor crouched on the floor in front of her. People watching from 3 feet away like it was theater. And every protective instinct she had fired at once. "Get away from her!" She was moving before she'd finished saying it. "Get away from my daughter right now!" "Ma'am?" Noah started to rise. Slowly. Carefully. "I said get away from her!" She grabbed him. Actually grabbed him, both hands on the front of his uniform, the fabric bunching in her fists, and shoved him back a full step. Hard. He was twice her size, but she was all force and momentum and maternal terror, and he let himself be moved because the alternative was to resist a panicking mother, and that was not a thing he was going to do. The crowd went completely still. Maya spun to face her daughter. Ari, look at me. Look at my face." But Ari wasn't looking at her mother. She was looking at Noah, and her hands were still down. "Ari, he was rocking with me," Ari said. Her voice was small and precise. "Like I do. He rocked exactly like I do." Maya blinked. "What?" "He didn't try to stop me." A pause. Everyone always tries to stop me." The silence in that small pocket of ballroom was extraordinary. Around them, the gala continued. Music, laughter, the clink of glasses. But in this 10-foot radius, everything had gone absolutely quiet. Maya turned to look at Noah. He had stepped back, given her space. His hands were at his sides, open. His face was calm, not defensive, not angry, not performing innocence, just steady. "You a doctor?" she said. Her voice had lost its edge, replaced by something more complicated. "No, ma'am." "Therapist? Specialist?" "No." She studied him. The uniform, the cart behind him, the name tag on his chest that read Noah in block letters. "Then what do you think you were doing?" Noah looked at the little girl, then back at her mother. "My son is 11, he said. "What just happened to her? He goes through it too. I know what it looks like. I know what helps." He paused. "I wasn't trying to do anything except give her a second to breathe." Maya stared at him. Behind her, someone cleared their throat. The crowd began to quietly disperse, the way crowds do when the spectacle resolves without blood. Ari reached out and tugged the sleeve of her mother's blazer. "Mom," she said, "he helped me." Maya didn't know what to do with that. She was a woman who always knew what to do. That was her entire identity, professionally and personally. She made decisions. She acted. She solved. She had built a company from 30 employees to over 400 through sheer force of clarity and will. She had navigated boardrooms and hostile acquisitions, and a divorce that would have leveled a lesser person. She did not stand in the middle of charity galas not knowing what to do. And yet... "Give us a moment," she said to the few people still lingering nearby. It came out in her CEO voice, not a request, and they scattered accordingly. She looked at Noah, then at her daughter, then back at Noah. "What's your name?" "Noah Carter." "How long have you been with the building services team, Noah?" 2 years at Solari, 11 in the industry. She nodded slowly, processing. There was something precise about the way she moved through information, even now, even rattled. Like even in the middle of chaos, some part of her was running the numbers. "My daughter has sensory processing differences," she said. The clinical language came easily, too easily, like armor. "She has a support team, therapists, specialists, people who have trained for years to help her. Tonight was..." She stopped, steadied. "Tonight was supposed to be manageable. We prepared." "Preparation doesn't always matter," Noah said, not unkindly. "Sometimes the room is just too much. Doesn't mean anyone failed." Maya looked at him sharply, like he'd said something she hadn't given him permission to say. Ari had wrapped her arms around her mother's waist and was standing with her face pressed against her side, still, but calm in a way she hadn't been 10 minutes ago. "She's not usually like this in public," Maya said. And then, immediately, something shifted in her face. She heard herself. What she'd said. The way she'd said it. "That's not..." she started again. "What I mean is..." "You don't have to explain," Noah said. "I'm not explaining, I'm..." She stopped. "I'm not sure what I'm doing." The honesty of that surprised both of them. Ari's voice came up from her mother's side, slightly muffled. "You were embarrassed. That's what you're doing." Silence. "Ari," Maya said. "You always say I should name what I'm feeling," Ari said. "So I named what you were feeling." Noah looked away. Not to hide a smile, exactly. More to give them a moment of privacy. "Can we find a quieter room?" Ari said. "The one near the coat check that you were talking about?" "Yes," Maya said, quietly. "Yes, we can do that." She didn't look at Noah again right away. She put her hand on the back of her daughter's head and steered her gently toward the edge of the room. But 3 steps in, she stopped. She turned. "Mr. Carter." He met her eyes. "Thank you." It came out clipped, controlled, like it cost her something. For what you did." "Of course," he said. "And a beat. I owe you an apology for how I—" "It's okay." And he meant it. "You were scared for your kid. That's all it was." Maya Solari looked at him for a long moment. A strange expression crossed her face. Something between gratitude and evaluation, and something she hadn't quite put words to yet. Then she nodded, once, and guided her daughter away into the crowd. Noah stood there for a moment. Then he picked up his cart and went back to work. He had bathrooms to check, a spill near the east bar, linens that needed moving before the kitchen staff came through. The gala continued around him, glittering and loud, full of people who would never notice the floors he kept clean, or the carpet corner he'd taped down, or the small invisible thing that had just happened in the middle of this enormous room. He moved along the edges. He made himself disappear. But as he worked, he was thinking about Max, about the birthday party 3 years ago, about the way his son had looked on the floor of that living room, hands over his ears, the world simply too much, and about the night Noah had first tried rocking with him instead of trying to stop him, because he'd run out of other ideas, and how Max had opened his eyes and looked at him with an expression that Noah still couldn't fully describe, even now. Like he'd been found. He thought about the way that little girl, Ari, had looked at him the same way, just for a second, before her mother had arrived, before the world had rushed back in. He emptied the trash near the east bar. He refilled the hand towels in the men's room. He found the spill, champagne near the second column, and cleaned it without being asked. He did all the invisible things that kept a room like this running. And he told himself it was over. That moment, whatever it had been, was done. He'd done what he could. The girl was with her mother. That was the right outcome. He told himself that. But the thing about the invisible man in the room is that just because no one is watching him doesn't mean he's stopped seeing everything. And Noah Carter had seen something tonight that he couldn't quite put down. He didn't know it yet, couldn't have known it, but neither could Maya Solari. And neither, in her own way, could Ari. The night was not even close to over. The coat check room was barely big enough for 2 people, but Maya had found it anyway, the way she found everything, by moving through a space like she already owned it and simply locating what she needed. A small alcove behind the main corridor, away from the speakers, away from the crowd. Someone had left a folding chair leaning against the wall. Maya unfolded it and sat Ari down without a word. For a few minutes, neither of them said anything. Ari had her hands folded in her lap. She was breathing through her nose, slow and deliberate, the way Dr. Reyes had taught her. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. The count was visible on her face if you knew how to read it. Maya knew how to read it. The slight pause at the top of each breath, the controlled release. Her daughter working the machinery of her own nervous system back into something manageable. Maya watched her and felt the familiar tangle of things she never said out loud. Pride, fear, love so sharp it sometimes felt like grief. And underneath it, tonight, something newer, and harder to name. Shame. Not shame at Ari, never at Ari. She'd worked hard enough on herself to know the difference. The shame was at her own voice in that ballroom, the edge in it. The way she'd said, "She's not usually like this in public," as if that were a comfort, as if that were the point, as if the point had ever been anything other than her daughter standing in the middle of a room with the world crashing in on her, and no one, not one single person in that crowd of 500, doing a thing about it. No one except a janitor who rocked. "Are you still angry at him?" Ari asked. Maya looked up. "What?" "The man, Noah." Ari said his name like she'd already decided something about him. "Are you still angry at him?" "I wasn't angry at him." Ari looked at her with the particular expression she used when she decided not to argue, but also wasn't going to pretend she agreed. Maya had privately named it the verdict face. It appeared whenever Ari had weighed something in her own internal court and reached a conclusion she considered final. "You grabbed him," Ari said. Maya stopped. "I didn't know what was happening. I came around the corner and there was a man I didn't know crouching in front of you and he was helping me." "I didn't know that." "He was rocking like me." A pause. "Nobody does that. When I rock, people try to get me to stop. They put their hands on my shoulders, or they crouch down and say my name over and over really loud like I can't hear them." She said it without accusation, just inventory. "He didn't do any of that. He just rocked." Maya was quiet for a moment. "How did that feel?" "Like being spoken to in my own language." The sentence landed so precisely that Maya didn't have an answer for it. She sat with it instead. Outside the alcove, the muffled bass of the gala continued its low pulse. Someone laughed in the corridor. A door swung open and shut. "I want to apologize to him," Ari said. "You don't need to apologize. You didn't do anything." "Not for me. For you." She looked up at her mother with those dark, calm eyes. "You grabbed him in front of everyone. That was embarrassing for him." Maya opened her mouth, closed it again, sat with the particular humbling experience of being corrected in matters of basic human dignity by her 9-year-old daughter. "You're right," she said finally. "I'll find him. After I finish counting." "After you finish counting." They sat in silence again, and Maya watched her daughter breathe, and thought about a janitor she hadn't looked at twice in 2 years of passing him in the corridors of her own building. Noah Carter. She turned the name over in her mind and felt something uncomfortable settle in. She hadn't looked at him twice. That was the truth of it. She passed the building services team every morning, sometimes said good morning, sometimes didn't, depending on how fast she was moving and what was already loading in her head before she'd reached her office. She couldn't have named one of them if asked. They were part of the infrastructure, like the elevators, like the clean floors. She thought about what he'd said. "My son is 11. What just happened to her?" "He goes through it too." She thought about the fact that he'd known instantly what was happening to her daughter. Had known it not from a textbook or a certification or a clinical framework. Had known it the way you know something when it lives in your house. She thought about what it had cost him to step forward in that room, in that crowd, dressed the way he was dressed, and she thought about what it said about him, that he'd done it anyway. And then she thought about the way she'd grabbed him. "Okay," Ari said. "I'm done counting." "Ready to go back in?" Ari considered the question seriously, the way she considered most questions. "Not to the main room. Is there somewhere else I can sit that's not the party but also not in here?" "There's a smaller reception room on the second floor. I think it's empty tonight. With you? I'll get you settled and check in every 15 minutes. I have to be downstairs for the presentation. Ari weighed this. Every 10 minutes. 12. 11. Maya almost smiled. Deal. They stood up together, and Ari slipped her hand into her mother's. Not the way she'd done it as a small child, reflexively, but deliberately. A choice. And Maya tightened her fingers around her daughter's and walked her back out into the corridor. Noah was 20 feet away, wiping down a service cart near the corridor's end. He hadn't been watching them. Or, if he had, he'd stopped before they emerged. He was focused on his cart, methodical, the way he did everything. Maya realized she did actually know that about him, had noted it without registering it. The quiet thoroughness of how he moved through spaces. Ari stopped walking. Maya felt the pull of her daughter's hand and stopped too. Ari looked at Noah. Then she looked up at her mother. Then she started walking toward him, towing Maya behind her. And Maya let herself be towed because what else was she going to do? "Excuse me," Ari said. Noah turned. He took them both in quickly, calmly. His face showed nothing adversarial. "My mom wants to apologize," Ari said. "Ari," Maya started, "you said you would." "I said I would find him. I didn't say I'd have you announce it like a—" She stopped, breathed, turned to Noah. "I owe you an apology." "A real one. What I did back there. Grabbing you. The things I said. That was wrong. You were helping my daughter, and I treated you like—" She paused, choosing the word carefully, and then deciding on honesty instead. "Like you were a threat, and that was unfair." Noah looked at her steadily. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." A beat. "I run a company that talks a lot about dignity and respect, and I grabbed a man in front of 500 people because I made an assumption in the first half second of seeing a situation. That matters to me, professionally and personally." He was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that wasn't empty. It was thinking. "I accept it," he said. "Apology accepted." "Thank you." She held his gaze. "Your son, the one you mentioned, 11 years old?" Something shifted slightly in his expression. "Yes." "What's his name?" A beat, like he hadn't expected the question. "Max." "Max," she nodded. "How long have you known about the sensory processing?" "Since he was about 6, maybe a little before. We just didn't have the name for it yet." "We found out when Ari was 7, Maya said. "Before that, I thought I was—" She stopped herself. This was not a conversation she had with strangers. This was not a conversation she had in corridors outside charity galas. And yet, "I thought I was failing her. I thought everything I was doing was wrong, and I couldn't figure out why. And everyone kept telling me she was fine. She'd grow out of it. She just needed more discipline." She said the last word with a precision that was almost violent. More discipline. "Yeah," Noah said. "Just that." But the word carried a full room's worth of recognition. "What changed it for you?" Maya asked. "With Max?" He seemed to consider whether to answer. Then, "A night when he was 7. Birthday party for one of his friends. The place had a bouncy castle and one of those industrial blower things that makes this constant loud hum. And there was a DJ, and by the time we were 20 minutes in, Max was on the floor in the corner with his hands over his ears. And I was trying to do all the things you do. 'Come on, buddy, it's okay. You're okay. Let's get up. Everyone's watching.' And none of it was working. It was making it worse." A pause. And then I just stopped. sat down next to him on the floor. And I started doing what he was doing, rocking. I didn't know why. I just ran out of other ideas. And after about 2 minutes, he opened his eyes and looked at me like... He stopped, searched for it. Like he'd been trying to call someone, and the call finally connected. Maya was quiet. Ari was looking at Noah with an expression that Maya recognized. The same one her daughter used when she'd found something that exactly matched a category she'd been searching for, but hadn't had a word for yet. "That's what it felt like," Ari said, "when you rocked with me. Like the call connected." Noah looked at her. Something moved through his face, there and gone, like weather. "Yeah," he said. "That's it exactly." "Does Max know you do that for him?" "He's never said so directly." A small pause. "But he still lets me do it, so I think he knows." Ari nodded, serious and satisfied, like the case had been closed to her satisfaction. Maya shifted her weight. She was aware of time. She was always aware of time. It was one of the things about her that Ari sometimes said out loud, with the ruthlessness of a child who had no patience for social performance. And she had a presentation in 31 minutes, and a floor full of investors and donors, and the director of 3 separate foundations, all of whom needed managing. But she didn't move. "What does Max do?" she asked Noah. "When he has a hard time in public, and you're not there?" "He has a plan." Something like pride in his voice, low but real. "We made it together. He's got a playlist he puts on, specific songs in a specific order. The rhythm is the thing, not the melody. And he's got a card in his wallet that explains to adults around him what's happening, so they don't panic or call anyone. He came up with the card himself." He paused. "He designed it on the computer and had me print it out and laminate it. Put a little icon on it. He's very particular." Maya almost smiled. "Ari makes lists." "Lists?" "For everything. Events, situations, transitions. She prepares them in advance. Every element she can anticipate, in order, with contingencies." She glanced at her daughter. "She had a list for tonight." "I did," Ari confirmed. 14 items. I got through 9. "What was item 10?" Noah asked. "Managing the music volume mentally by focusing on a single instrument." She paused. "The bass was too loud for that to work. The bass gets into your body, and you can't think past it." Noah nodded like this required no further explanation, because it didn't. And Maya watched this exchange between her daughter and this man she didn't know. Watched Ari explain her interior world to him with a directness and ease that she almost never used with people she'd just met, or people she'd known for years, or sometimes people at all. And felt something quiet and complicated move through her. Ari wasn't performing. She wasn't managing. She was just talking. Plainly. Openly. The way she talked at home on her best days, in the living room with her shoes off and the television muted and no agenda in the air. She was talking to Noah Carter the way she talked to people she trusted. And they'd met 45 minutes ago. "We should let you get back to work," Maya said. She didn't want to say it, which was new. You've already gone far beyond." "It's fine," Noah said simply. "I'm glad she's okay." "She is." A pause. "Thanks to you." He shook his head. "She was already doing the work. I just stood next to her while she did it." Maya looked at him for a moment. There was something in the way he said it. Modest without being self-deprecating. Accurate without performing humility. That reminded her of no one so much as Ari herself. The precise use of words. The refusal to overclaim. "I'd like," she started, and then stopped, because she wasn't sure what she'd like. She'd like to continue this conversation, which was an unusual thing for her to want at a gala. She'd like to know more about Max. She'd like to understand how Noah Carter, in 11 years of watching the edges of rooms full of people who never noticed him, had developed a body of knowledge and empathy that her daughter's trained and credentialed support team had never quite managed to replicate. She'd like to understand what that meant, about the system, about expertise, about where real knowledge actually lived. But she had a presentation in 29 minutes. "I'll be back down in about an hour," she said instead. "After the program, if you're still on shift." "I'm here until midnight." "I'd like to talk more, if you're willing." He studied her for a beat, measuring something. "About Max and Ari?" "About that, and about—" She gestured in a way that was uncharacteristically vague. "About what you know." A pause. "Sure," he said. "I'll be around." Maya nodded. She turned to Ari and held out her hand. "Second floor?" "Second floor," Ari agreed. She reached for her mother's hand, then looked back at Noah. "I hope Max is okay tonight." Noah blinked. "He's with his grandmother. He's good." "Good," she considered for a moment. "Does he have friends who understand him?" "He's got one good one. Kid named Darius. They met at a music program at the community center." A warmth in his voice that hadn't been there before. "Darius doesn't have sensory issues, but he has a kind of patience that he has it naturally. Some kids do." Ari nodded, taking this in. "I have one good one too. Her name is Petra. She found out about my sensory stuff in 3rd grade and then looked it up online so she could understand it better." A pause. "She printed out articles and brought them to school in a folder." Noah laughed. It was brief and genuine, and it changed his face entirely. Younger somehow, lighter. And Maya noticed it, and noticed that she noticed it, which was unusual. "That's a real friend," he said. "Yes," Ari said. "She is." Maya squeezed her daughter's hand, and they walked toward the elevator. At the corner, Ari looked back once. Noah had returned to his cart. He didn't see her look back, or if he did, he gave no sign. He was just working again. The quiet, efficient, invisible work of the man who kept the floors clean and the carpets taped down, and the infrastructure running so that rooms full of important people could exist without ever thinking about any of it. Ari watched him for 2 seconds, then turned and followed her mother to the elevator. She didn't say anything else, but she was thinking. Maya could always tell when Ari was thinking. It was in the stillness of her, the particular quality of her silence when something had lodged itself in her mind and begun working its way through her internal architecture, orderly and thorough, the way she processed everything. The elevator opened. They stepped in. "Mom," Ari said as the doors closed. "Yes?" "He sees things." "What do you mean?" Ari was quiet for a moment, finding the right words with her usual precision. "Most people, when they look at something, they see what they expect. They have a picture already in their head of what the thing should be, and they match it to the picture." She paused. "He doesn't do that. He just looks. He saw what was actually happening." Another pause. "Not many people see what's actually happening." Maya looked at her daughter in the closed elevator. The doors opened on the 2nd floor. The corridor was quiet and cool and completely empty. "No," Maya said. "They don't." They walked to the small reception room, and Maya got Ari settled on the couch with her phone and her earbuds and a glass of water and the promise of 11-minute check-ins, and then she went back down to the gala and stood at the edge of the room and did the thing she was best at: reading a space, mapping the people in it, understanding who needed managing and in what order. And she did all of it on autopilot because a part of her brain was still in the corridor upstairs. He just looks. She shook it off. The presentation started in 14 minutes. The director of the Hargrove Foundation was crossing the room toward her with his hand already extended. She put on the smile that said ready, that said capable, that said, "This is a room you can trust me to lead." But she was thinking about a janitor and his 11-year-old son, and the laminated card, and a playlist built out of rhythm rather than melody, and what it meant that a man she'd never once noticed had been moving through her world for 2 years, carrying something that her daughter needed. And what else she'd missed? What else was invisible? The director reached her, and she shook his hand and said exactly the right thing. And the night moved forward the way nights like this always did, with momentum and noise and the performance of importance. And she played her part perfectly. But tonight, for the first time and longer than she could clearly remember, something had gotten through the performance. Something quiet, something she didn't have a word for yet. And she thought, without meaning to, about 11 minutes. She was going to keep track. She kept every single check-in. 11 minutes, on the dot, 4 times over the course of the next 44 minutes. She excused herself from conversations mid-sentence to do it. She left the Hargrove Foundation director standing at the bar holding a glass of something expensive, waiting for her to finish a thought she never finished. She cut across the room between the keynote and the donor reception like someone with somewhere more important to be. And she was. And she did. And she didn't apologize for any of it. Ari was asleep by the third check-in, phone still in her hand, earbuds in, curled onto her side on the reception room couch, with her shoes neatly placed on the floor beside her. She always took her shoes off when she could, said it helped her think, and her face completely slack and open, in a way it almost never was when she was awake. Maya stood in the doorway for a moment longer than 11 minutes required, just watching her daughter breathe, and then went back downstairs and shook more hands and said more right things, and moved through the rest of the evening like the professional she'd spent 20 years becoming. The gala wound down the way galas do. Not all at once, but in stages. The crowd thinning as the older guests left first, then the ones with early flights, then the ones with children at home. By 10:30, the room was half empty, and the kitchen staff had started breaking down the appetizer stations. By 11, the lights had come up slightly, that universal signal that the party was entering its final chapter. Noah was near the east wall, stacking folding chairs at the edge of the room when Maya found him. She came directly. No hesitation, no circling. She'd made a decision, and she executed decisions cleanly. That was the architecture of how she operated. And the decision was this. She'd said she wanted to talk, and she was going to talk. And the fact that it was nearly 11 o'clock at a charity gala, and she was approaching the janitor instead of the last remaining cluster of donors, was a fact she'd process later, privately. "She's asleep upstairs," Maya said. Noah looked up from the chairs. "Good sleep or hard sleep?" The question was so specific, so parent-specific, that it caught her briefly off guard. "Good, I think." She looked calm. "Good sleep," he confirmed, and went back to the chairs. She stood there for a second, which was unusual for her. She was not generally a person who stood while deciding how to begin. "You said we could talk." "I did." He set down the chair in his hands, turned to face her fully. "Give me 2 minutes to tell Marcus I'm taking a break." She waited. He crossed the room to a heavy-set man in the same uniform. The lead supervisor, she guessed. Said something brief, got a nod, and came back. "There's a service corridor through there," he said, tilting his head toward a door near the east wall. "Quieter." She followed him through. The corridor was plain and clean, and exactly the kind of space that existed in every large building, and that most people never saw. Bare walls, utility lighting, a rack of clean tablecloths along one side, the mechanical hum of something ventilating somewhere above them. It smelled like industrial detergent and faintly like coffee from a break room somewhere down the hall. Noah leaned against the wall and crossed his arms loosely. Not defensive, just settled. "You had questions," he said. "I have a lot of questions," Maya said. "I'm going to try to ask them in some reasonable order." "Go ahead." She started with the easier ones. How long had he known about sensory processing as a concept? Not just as a thing Max experienced, but as a named thing with a framework around it. What resources had he found? What had worked and what hadn't? Whether Max had an IEP at school? Whether the school had been cooperative? What challenges he'd run into with teachers who either over-accommodated in ways that isolated Max, or under-accommodated in ways that left him stranded. Noah answered everything directly and without performance. He didn't minimize or dramatize. He just told her what was true. Yes, Max had an IEP. The first school had been difficult. A vice principal who'd used the phrase, "He just needs to toughen up," and had apparently said it to Noah's face without a trace of self-awareness, which Noah recounted in a tone of such flat, contained restraint that Maya could hear exactly how much effort that restraint had cost. The current school was better. His third-grade teacher, a woman named Mrs. Okafor, who had a nephew with similar needs, had become an unexpected ally. She'd restructured the classroom layout twice to reduce Noah's auditory triggers, had created a signal system between her and Max so he could indicate overload without having to speak it out loud, had somehow managed to do all of this without making Max feel different from his classmates in a way that would have mortified him. "Is he mortified anyway?" Maya asked. "Sometimes. He's 11. Self-consciousness is basically a full-time occupation at that age." A small pause. "But less than before. A lot less." "What changed it, beyond Mrs. Okafor?" Noah thought about it. He found his thing. Music? Music. He'd always responded to rhythm. I mean, from when he was tiny. If he was upset, you could tap a rhythm on a table next to him, and he'd slow down. Like it gave his nervous system something to organize around. But we didn't turn it into something he owned until about 2 years ago. He shifted his weight slightly. The community center had a program. Free on Saturday mornings. Drum circle, some basic music theory, a little bit of movement. I signed him up mostly to give him something to do on weekends when I was working. And he walked in and sat down next to a floor tom and played it for 90 minutes straight without stopping, and came home and looked at me with this expression like he'd just discovered gravity had a name. Noah stopped. His jaw tightened slightly, not with pain, but with the effort of holding something large in a small container. He said, "Dad, I didn't know that was a thing. I thought I was just weird." The corridor was quiet for a moment. "What did you say?" Maya asked. I said, "You are weird. Weird just means you're running a different program than most people, and some programs are better for certain things than others." He let out a breath. He thought about that for a minute, and then asked if we could get a drum kit. "Did you?" I got him a practice pad and a pair of sticks, and told him when he could play a full paradiddle without stopping, I'd talk about an actual kit. A beat. He learned the paradiddle in a week. Maya was quiet for a moment. Then, "Do you have one?" "The kit." "We have a modified one, electronic, so the neighbors don't call anyone. He plays it every day after school." He paused. every single day, without being told, without being asked. He just goes directly to his room and plays for 45 minutes and comes out afterward like he had a full conversation with himself and resolved everything that needed resolving. 45 minutes, Maya repeated. Does he know that's what he's doing? I told him once that it looked like he was processing his day through the drums. He almost smiled. He said, obviously, like I'd pointed out something too basic to warrant acknowledgement. Maya recognized that. She'd heard that same obviously from Ari more times than she could count. That particular tone of a child confirming a truth they'd already long since catalogued while the adult was just catching up. Ari writes, she said. Not diaries, more like technical documents. She writes up things that happen during her day in this very precise, almost clinical language, and then files them in folders on her tablet, organized by category. She paused. I found out about it by accident. She'd left it open. She had a folder called Maya, and inside it were documents titled things like Interaction 47, Parking Garage Disagreement, and Interaction 52, Successful Restaurant Visit. Noah looked at her steadily. How did that feel? Initially, she let a beat pass. Like I was being studied by my own daughter. A pause. Then I read one of them, and I realized she wasn't studying me. She was building a map, a guide for navigating the world through the lens of the people in it. She stopped. The documents weren't cold. They were... She'd written observations about what I was feeling in the interactions, what I might have needed, what worked and what didn't. Another pause, this one longer. She's 9. She was doing emotional field work. To stay safe, Noah said, not a question. To stay connected, Maya corrected, and surprised herself with the certainty of it. She wasn't mapping the world to protect herself from it. She was mapping it to find a way into it. She was quiet for a moment. I didn't understand that until fairly recently. What changed? I read Interaction 61. She stopped there, and something in her face shifted, moved towards something she kept very controlled in public, and was apparently choosing, in this corridor, in this conversation, to let approach the surface. It was about a night when I came home late from a board meeting, and she was already in bed, and I went in to check on her, and she was awake, and I sat on the edge of her bed, and we talked for about 20 minutes about absolutely nothing. A show she was watching, a thing Petra had said at school. Nothing important. I didn't even remember it clearly until I read what she'd written. She paused. She'd written, "This was the best interaction of the month. Maya was not performing. She was just there. I would like more of this category." The ventilation hummed above them. Noah didn't say anything. He didn't try to package it, or reflect it back in a softer form, or redirect towards something more comfortable. He just let it exist. Maya appreciated that more than she could have articulated. I work a lot, she said, not as explanation, as fact. I've always worked a lot. The company was built on it. Before the company, my career was built on it. It's how I function. It's how I process. Movement, action, output. She paused. Ari processes through stillness and documentation and rhythm and Petra. A beat. We are not temperamentally natural partners. But you love each other. Completely. No hesitation. Completely, and sometimes very badly. And I'm trying to learn to do it better. She looked at him directly. That's the honest version. That's a good version, he said. What's yours? With Max? He took a breath. My wife left when Max was 4. Maya didn't flinch or fill the silence with sympathy noises. She waited. Not because of Max. To be clear about that, she'd been leaving for a year before we either of us admitted it. We were 22 when we got married, and we built a life together that fit who we were at 22, and then grew into different people, and the life stopped fitting. A pause. She's in Portland now. She's good. She's got a good life. She and Max have something. It took time, but they have something real now. He looked down briefly. But for a long time, it was just me and a 3-year-old, turning 4, turning 5. And I was working every shift I could get and trying to figure out how to be everything he needed. How did you do it? Badly for a while. Said without self-pity, just record. I was tired all the time and short-tempered more than I wanted to be. And I made the mistake a lot of single parents make, which is trying to be so consistent and solid and unbroken for your kid that you forget to actually be a person in front of them. He paused. Max called me on it when he was 8. He said, "Dad, you never say when you're tired." And I said, "I'm fine, I'm not tired." And he said, "That's what I mean. You always say you're fine, and I know you're not always fine. And it makes me feel like being not fine is something I'm supposed to hide." Maya was very still. 8 years old, Noah said. He handed me that. "What did you say?" I sat down on the kitchen floor and told him I was exhausted and that work had been hard that week, and that I missed his mother sometimes, even though I knew our life was better now, and that I was scared sometimes about whether I was doing any of it right. He stopped. I said all of it, right there on the kitchen floor. How did he respond? He sat down next to me, and we didn't say anything for about 5 minutes. And then he said, "I think you're doing okay, Dad. You show up every day. That's the main thing." A pause. From an 8-year-old. You show up every day. That's the main thing. Maya pressed her lips together briefly. Where did he get that from? Me. I used to say it to him on hard days. You showed up. That's what matters. His voice was level, but the weight behind it was not. He gave it back to me when I needed it. I didn't even know he'd kept it. The corridor held them both in silence for a moment. The good kind. The kind that isn't empty but full. The kind that two people share when something real has passed between them, and neither wants to immediately cover it with words. Then Maya's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, looked up. Hargrove Foundation Director. I've been avoiding him for 40 minutes. She didn't sound particularly troubled by this. He wants to discuss the next phase of the Education Equity Program. That the one this whole event was for? Supposedly. She slid the phone back into her pocket. I've been thinking, in the last 2 hours, that the program has a significant gap. What gap? Neurodivergent children. We fund tutoring programs, after-school enrichment, early literacy initiatives. All of it assumes neurotypical processing. None of it, not one component, addresses the fact that a child who's experiencing sensory overload in a standard classroom environment cannot access any of those resources, no matter how excellent they are. She said it the way she said things she'd been working through quickly and had reached a conclusion on. Efficient. Certain. I've known this for a while, actually. I just hadn't done anything about it yet. Why not? Because I didn't have the right framework for it. I had Ari's support team, who were clinical and excellent, and also completely out of touch with how the other 95% of families live. I had research, which is useful and insufficient. I didn't have... She paused. I didn't have the right starting point. Noah looked at her carefully. And now? Now I've spent 2 hours in conversation with a man who figured out something that took years of clinical practice to approximate, through the process of loving his son and paying attention. She held his gaze. That's a starting point. He was quiet, not uncomfortable. He didn't do uncomfortable quietly, she was learning, but weighing something. What are you asking? He said. I'm not asking anything tonight. Tonight, I'm just talking. A beat. But I'd like to continue the conversation, somewhere that isn't a service corridor, with more time and less. She gestured vaguely at the sounds of the gala still filtering through the door. All of that. About the program. About the program, and about what you know. And about what Max and Ari might have in common with a few thousand other kids in this city who aren't getting what they need. She paused. If you're willing to have that conversation. He looked at her for a long moment. There was something in his eyes that she couldn't fully read. Assessment, maybe, or caution. The expression of someone who'd been on the underside of charity before and knew the difference between being helped and being used. She respected that he was running the check. I have a full week of shifts, he said. I'm not asking you to leave your shifts. I'm asking for a coffee, whenever you have time. What would it involve, actually? Listening to you. Then some questions. Then, I don't know exactly. I'd want to bring in Ari's support team and talk about what they're missing. I'd want to map out what practical support looks like for families who don't have the resources Ari has. She paused. I'd want to understand what you had to figure out on your own that should have been available to you. The words landed in a particular way. He didn't react overtly, but something in his posture shifted. The slightest easing of a thing held long and habitually. There's a lot of that, he said. I know, she said. I imagine there is. The door from the ballroom opened, and Marcus leaned through. Carter, we're moving to breakdown if you're... He clocked Maya, adjusted his tone slightly. Sorry to interrupt. It's fine, Noah said. I'm coming. He straightened up from the wall, and for a second, he and Maya were just two parents in a corridor, slightly tired, having accidentally crossed the enormous invisible distance between their respective worlds and found it smaller than expected. Thank you, she said, for the conversation. Same. He moved toward the door, then stopped. She's going to be okay, you know. Ari. Maya looked at him. She knows herself, he said. Kids who know themselves, even when the world hasn't made room for what they know, they find their way. He paused. Max taught me that. He went back through the door. Maya stood alone in the service corridor for a moment, listening to the faint sounds of chairs being stacked and tables broken down, and the invisible infrastructure of the evening being dismantled around her. Then she took out her phone and ignored the Hargrove Foundation director entirely, and instead opened her calendar and blocked a window at the end of the following week, and typed into the title field 3 words. Coffee. Noah Carter. She stared at it. Then she added a 4th word. Important. She put the phone away and went to collect her sleeping daughter from the 2nd floor. And she carried Ari, all 47 pounds of her, shoes neatly in one hand, to the elevator and down to the car. And Ari didn't fully wake up, just made a small sound and turned her face into her mother's shoulder. And Maya held her tighter and walked out through the main entrance, past the deflating balloon arch and the folded red carpet and all the grand apparatus of the evening. The valet brought the car around. She buckled Ari into the back seat. She sat behind the wheel and didn't start the engine for a full minute. She was thinking about a laminated card, about a playlist ordered by rhythm, about a kitchen floor and an 8-year-old who had saved what his father had said and returned it at exactly the right moment. She was thinking about interaction 61. Maya was not performing. She was just there. She started the car. She drove home in the quiet, her daughter asleep in the back, and she thought about all the rooms she moved through every day, and all the invisible things that happened in them, and all the people she'd never looked at closely enough to see. And she thought that maybe that was going to change, starting with one conversation over coffee. Starting there. The coffee was at a place called Denny's, not because it was the kind of place Maya Solari typically suggested for meetings. She had a regular table at 3 different restaurants within walking distance of the Solari Enterprises building, all of them with good light and discreet staff and menus that signaled a certain level of seriousness. But because Noah had named it when she'd asked where was convenient for him, and she'd said, "Fine," without hesitation. And that small thing had mattered to him in a way he didn't say out loud. He was there first. Booth in the back corner, coffee already ordered, a yellow legal pad on the table that he'd bought at a Walgreens on the way over because he hadn't known whether to bring anything, and had decided to bring something to write on, just in case. It sat there, looking slightly absurd, and he almost moved it to his lap when she walked in. But then he didn't, because moving it would have said something he didn't want to say. Maya arrived 3 minutes after the times he'd specified, which he suspected was late for her. She was dressed differently than the gala. Not casually exactly, but without the armor of it. Dark slacks, a simple gray top, hair down. She looked like herself, he thought, which was probably unfair since he'd only seen her one other time and under extreme circumstances. But there was something about her today that matched what he'd heard in the service corridor, more than what he'd seen in the ballroom. "Traffic," she said, sitting down and unfolding a napkin. "Or my own calendar, one of the two." She looked at the legal pad. "I like it. I should have brought one." "I didn't know what to bring." Neither did I. She'd brought nothing, it turned out, which for someone who ran 400-person company meetings was either very relaxed or very deliberate. "I thought I'd just listen first and see where it goes." The server came. Maya ordered coffee and something called a Grand Slam without looking at the menu, which told him she'd been here before, which rearranged something he'd assumed. She caught his expression. "I travel for work constantly," she said. "Denny's is everywhere. It's the one restaurant in America I can walk into at any hour in any city and know exactly what I'm getting." A beat. "There's something to be said for that." "Consistency," he said. "Reliability. It's not glamorous, but it does what it says it will." She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. "Ari has a thing about Denny's, actually. She likes that the menu never changes. She said once that it's a restaurant that respects people who don't like surprises." He smiled at that. "How is she?" "Better. She slept until 10 on Saturday, which she never does. I think the overload just drained everything." A pause. "She asked about you." He hadn't expected that. What did she ask? Whether you'd be coming back to the building. Whether I'd talk to you again. Maya set down her coffee. She also asked whether Max had learned any new songs. She remembered that. She remembers everything, every detail of every interaction, filed in the correct folder. A slight softening around her eyes. "I told her I was having coffee with you today, and she said to tell you that she figured out what went wrong with item 10. The bass. Apparently, she's been doing research. She found a study about low-frequency sound and sensory processing, and has developed a revised protocol for managing it." A pause. "She's 9. Yeah, Noah said. She really is something. She is, quietly. Then Maya shifted, not physically, but conversationally, the way someone shifts when they finish the warm-up and are ready to get to it. I want to tell you what I've been thinking since the gala, and then I want to hear what you actually think about it. Not what you think I want to hear, what you actually think. Okay. The Education Equity Program we run through the Hargrove Foundation, and through 3 other foundation partnerships, actually, operates in 11 school districts across the metro area. After-school enrichment, tutoring, early intervention for reading and math. We reach about 4,000 kids annually. She paused. Of those 4,000 kids, roughly 600 have some form of diagnosed sensory processing difference, learning difference, or neurodevelopmental profile that puts them outside the neurotypical range. That's the diagnosed number. The actual number is probably closer to 900, because a lot of families never get a diagnosis, either because they don't have access to the right practitioners, or because they don't know what they're looking for, or both. Or because they've been told it's a discipline problem, Noah said. Or that, a flat acknowledgement. Of those 600 to 900 kids, approximately 12% are being meaningfully served by what we currently offer. The rest either drop out of the programs within the first few months, or show up inconsistently, or are technically enrolled, but not actually absorbing anything, because the environment isn't built for how they process. 12%. He sat with that for a second. What does your support team say about it? My support team is excellent and completely wrong about this in a very specific way, Maya said. They understand the clinical framework. They can tell me about sensory diets and IEP structures and therapeutic interventions that work in controlled one-on-one settings. What they cannot tell me, what none of them has been able to tell me because none of them has lived it, is how a single parent working 2 jobs is supposed to implement a sensory diet for their kid when they get home at 7 p.m., and dinner still needs making, and homework still needs doing, and there is no occupational therapist available on a Tuesday evening in a zip code that isn't this one. Noah was quiet. The server brought food. Neither of them acknowledged it for a moment. That's the gap, she said. That's the gap, he confirmed. So what fills it? He picked up the pen next to the legal pad, not to write anything yet, more like holding something solid while he thought. When Max was 7 and I didn't know what was happening yet, the most useful thing that ever happened to me was another dad at his school. Kid named Darius's father. You heard me mention Darius. The patient one. Right. His dad pulled me aside after pickup one day and said, I think our kids might have some things in common. Can I show you some stuff? And over about 3 months, just in parking lots and text messages, and one Saturday afternoon at his kitchen table, he walked me through everything he'd figured out. Not from a textbook, from 11 years of parenting his son. He paused. He showed me the rocking thing. He showed me the rhythm thing. He told me about the signal system, the way you build a private language with your kid so they can tell you they're maxed out without having to say it in front of people and be embarrassed. He set the pen down. That conversation, those conversations, were worth more than anything I got from any clinical resource. Because it wasn't theoretical. It was just one parent handing another parent the map they'd already drawn. Maya was very still. That's what the program doesn't have, he said. That handoff, parent to parent, family to family. Not clinical, not credential-based, just, here's what I learned. Here's what actually works on a Tuesday evening when you're exhausted and your kid is maxed out and the official resources are 3 weeks away. A peer support model, she said. if you want to give it a name. I want to build it, she said. That's why I'm here. He looked at her. I want to build a component of the program that does exactly what you're describing. Experienced parents, parents who've been through the learning curve, who've developed real working knowledge, connected directly with families who are earlier in the process. Not as counselors or clinicians, as people who've been there. She paused. And I want the curriculum, if that's even the right word for it, to come from the lived experience first, and from the clinical framework second, not the other way around. Okay, he said slowly. How? I want you to help me design it. The booth was quiet for a moment. Outside, someone's car horn sounded on the street. The kitchen clattered distantly. I'm a janitor, Noah said. Not with bitterness, just clarity. I know what you are, she said. And I know what you know. Those are not the same thing, and they are both relevant. She held his gaze. I have clinical experts, Maya. I have program designers and foundation directors and educational consultants. What I don't have is someone who figured out the rocking thing in a bouncy castle at a birthday party because he ran out of other ideas and loved his kid enough to sit down on the floor. She paused. That is a specific and irreplaceable form of knowledge, and I am asking you to contribute it. He was quiet for a long time. Long enough that she let it be long, which told him something about her. She'd learned, somewhere, to let silence work. What would it actually look like? He said. My involvement. Initially, conversations, like this one. I want to understand what you know, all of it. The rocking, the rhythm, the signal systems, the laminated card, the playlist. How you built each tool. What need it was responding to. What you tried before it that didn't work. She paused. Then I want to bring you into a meeting with the program team and have you say to them directly what you've said to me. Because I can repeat it, but I'm not the right messenger. Why not? Because when I say it, it sounds like a CEO describing a gap in her foundation's service model. When you say it, it sounds like what it is. She looked at him plainly. A father describing what his son needed and what the world didn't have available. He exhaled slowly, looked at the legal pad, picked up the pen, and this time actually wrote something. Not for her to read, just a word, for himself, to make the thought solid. He turned the pad slightly, and she could see it. Real. There are things I'd need, he said. Tell me. This doesn't take me away from my job. I've got Max to support, and I can't mess around with my income. Any meetings happen on your schedule, on your time off. We compensate you for your time. I'm not doing it for compensation. I know, you're still getting it. She said it without room for negotiation, which he found he didn't mind. What else? The families in the program, the ones you're trying to reach, they're not going to trust something that comes in looking like a corporate initiative with a logo on it. I know. So it can't look like that. It has to come from the ground up. The parents who participate have to own it. They have to feel like it belongs to them, not like they've been enrolled in someone's charity project. Agreed. How do we get there? He thought about it. You start small. You find 3 or 4 families who are a few years into the process, who figured some things out and are willing to share them. Not the polished success stories, the ones who are still in the middle of it, but further along than the families you're trying to reach. You put them in a room, or in someone's living room, honestly, somewhere that doesn't feel institutional, and you let them talk. You don't structure it too much. You let the knowledge surface naturally. And you'd be one of those families. If Max agrees to it, I don't make decisions that involve him without asking him. Maya nodded. immediately, without hesitation. Of course. He's going to have opinions. Good, I'd like to hear them. He looked at her. He's going to want to know why a CEO is interested in his dad's idea. Then I'll tell him the truth. A CEO made a lot of assumptions about a man she didn't look at closely enough, and then her daughter was in distress in the middle of a crowded room, and the man who helped wasn't a doctor or a therapist or a specialist. He was a dad who'd been there. She paused, and that made her think about all the other people she hadn't looked at closely enough and what they might know. Noah was quiet for a moment. He'll respect that, he said finally. Max has a very low tolerance for people who don't say what's actually true. Got it from me. I respect that too, Maya said. It makes conversations faster. They ate. For a little while, the conversation eased into something more lateral. He told her about a technique he'd developed for transitions, the moments when Max had to shift from one activity to another, which had always been particularly difficult. The transition warning system. A 5-minute heads-up, then a 2-minute heads-up, then a count. Not arbitrary numbers. Max had chosen them himself at age 8 after Noah had let him experiment with different intervals to see what gave him enough time without building so much anticipation that the anxiety grew bigger than the transition itself. Ari does something similar, Maya said. She sets timers, multiple alarms leading up to anything that requires a shift. She paused. Her therapist calls it scaffolding. Max's system is scaffolding. I just called it a heads up, Noah said. That's what scaffolding is. I know, I looked it up eventually. A pause. It helped to have a name for it. But it also slightly bothered me that there was a name for it, because it meant there was a whole body of knowledge about this thing I'd been fumbling around in the dark, trying to figure out for years, and nobody had handed it to me. I'd had to piece it together from library books and Google searches at midnight and parking lot conversations. His voice stayed level, but the weight in it was real. Max didn't need me to be a researcher. He needed me to be his dad. But because the resources weren't getting to us the right way, I had to be both. Maya set down her fork. That's the sentence, she said. That's the sentence that goes at the center of the program. Everything else builds out from that. He looked at her. He didn't need me to be a researcher. He needed me to be his dad. But because the resources weren't getting to us the right way, I had to be both. She said it back to him precisely, with his own cadence. That's the problem statement. That's what we're solving. He looked at the legal pad, picked up the pen, wrote it down, word for word. What are you going to call it? He asked. The program. She considered it. I had a name, but I want to hear if you have one first. I don't do names. That's not my part of this. What would you want it to feel like when a family hears the name? He thought about it for a moment. Like it's theirs. Like it belongs to them, not to a foundation or a company. He paused. Like someone built it in a quiet room, and it's waiting for them. She was quiet for a long moment. Quiet Hearts, she said. He looked up. Ari named it, actually. Not for a program. She doesn't know about any of this yet. But a few months ago, she was trying to describe to me what it feels like when her nervous system finally settles after a hard day. She said it feels like a quiet heart. Like everything that was going too fast finally finds the right speed. Maya paused. I wrote it down. Quiet Hearts, he said. Is it too soft? No, he said it immediately. No, it's right. It's exactly right. She nodded slowly. I think so too. They talked for 2 more hours. The server refilled their coffee twice and brought the check, and they both ignored it, and she brought it again, and eventually Maya took it without looking at it and set her card on top, and they kept talking. He walked her through everything, the complete progression, from the birthday party floor to the rocking, from the rocking to the rhythm, from the rhythm to Max's music program, from the music program to the drum kit, from the drum kit to the system of signals and warnings and laminated cards and playlists. The full 4 years of trial and error laid out in order. She listened without interrupting, except to ask clarifying questions that were always precise and always relevant. And he had the distinct feeling, the same feeling he'd had in the service corridor, that she was not performing attention. She was actually paying it. At one point she said, "Can I bring my program director into the next conversation? Her name is Della Chen. She's been running the educational equity work for 3 years, and she is excellent. And she will have a very strong reaction to everything you're telling me, and I want her to have it in front of you." Strong reaction meaning she'll see immediately what we've been missing, and she'll want to fix it as fast as possible. And she'll need someone to tell her to slow down and build it right. A pause. "I'm hoping that's you." "I can do that," he said. "Good." She checked her phone, briefly, just a glance, and he caught the slight adjustment in her posture that meant the window was closing. "I have a 3 o'clock. I've got pickup at 3:30. They both stood. He picked up the legal pad. She'd written nothing down, but he'd written 3 pages, and he was slightly embarrassed by that, until he remembered that she'd said she'd just listen, and have apparently meant it completely. "I'm going to have my assistant reach out to you this week about scheduling," she said. "If something comes through from a number you don't recognize, that's probably her." "Okay." They were at the door. The afternoon was bright outside and slightly cold, the kind of March day that couldn't make up its mind about what season it wanted to be. He pushed it open, and she stepped through, and they stood for a moment on the sidewalk with no particular reason to stand there, except that neither of them had moved yet. "I want to say something," Maya said, "and I want to say it once, and then we don't have to keep coming back to it." He waited. "I am not doing this because I feel guilty. I'm not doing this because of what happened at the gala, or because I owe you something. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to build, and you're the right person to help build it." She looked at him directly. "I want to be clear about that because I know how charity can feel when it comes from the wrong place. And this is not that. This is a collaboration. You bring something I don't have. I bring something you don't have. That's a partnership, not a program." He held her gaze for a moment. "I appreciate you saying that. I mean it. I know." He did know. That was the thing about her. Whatever else she didn't say things she didn't mean. He'd learned that in about 90 minutes in a service corridor. "I'll be in touch." She nodded, took 2 steps, then turned. "Tell Max I said the paradiddle thing was very impressive. Learning it in a week." "How do you know what a paradiddle is?" "I looked it up last night." Said simply, as though this were an ordinary thing to do at whatever hour she'd been awake, looking up drumming terminology. "It looked hard." "It is hard." "Then he's remarkable." She walked to her car. He watched her go without making a thing of it. And then he walked to his own car, the 12-year-old Civic with a busted rear speaker that Max had tried to fix once and made slightly worse. And he sat behind the wheel and looked at the legal pad on the passenger seat, and the 3 pages of notes and the word real he'd written early on. He thought about Max, who would be walking out of school in 40 minutes, backpack too heavy as always, because he refused to leave books behind even on days he didn't need them. He thought about how Max would climb in the passenger seat and say, "How was it?" with a specific inflection he used when he was genuinely interested rather than making conversation. The inflection he'd had since he was 6 and had never lost. He was going to tell him everything. Not a child's version, not a filtered version, the real version. Because Max had earned the real version a long time ago, on a kitchen floor, when he'd handed his father's own words back to him at exactly the right moment. You show up every day. That's the main thing. Noah turned the key. The engine caught. The busted rear speaker emitted its usual faint buzz, and he didn't do anything about it. Because he never did. Because it had become, over the years, simply the sound his car made. And you got used to the specific sounds of the things you loved. He pulled out of the parking lot and headed toward the school. 3 pages of notes on a yellow legal pad. A program that didn't exist yet. A name that came from his daughter. Correction, from Maya's daughter. And the way a nervous system felt when it finally found the right speed. He drove and thought and didn't turn on the radio because the quiet was doing something useful. And he'd learned, over 11 years of parenting and working and paying attention, to let the quiet do its work. Something was starting. He could feel it the way you feel a weather change before you can name it. Something in the atmosphere, some shift in the pressure, a signal that the next thing was coming. Not loudly, not with fanfare. The way the best things usually came, quietly and for real. Max already knew something was different before his father said a word. He climbed into the passenger seat the way he always did, backpack first, then body. Door pulled shut with a particular force that meant he'd had a full day and his arms were tired. And he looked at his dad and said, "What happened?" Noah glanced at him. "What do you mean?" "You've got the face." "What face?" "The one where something happened and you're deciding how to say it." Max dropped the backpack between his feet and buckled his seatbelt. "You've had it since I got in the car." Noah pulled out of the school pickup lane and merged onto the street and was quiet for a moment. And Max let him be quiet, because Max understood the value of quiet in a way that a lot of 11-year-olds didn't. And he waited. "You remember I told you about the gala 2 weeks ago?" Noah said. "The girl who was having a hard time?" "Ari," Max said. "Yeah. I had coffee today with her mom." Max turned to look at him. "The one who grabbed you." "She apologized for that." "She should have," said without heat, just fact. "So what happened at coffee?" Noah told him. All of it. The 12%, the gap in the program, the peer support model, the living room instead of the institution. The name that had come from Ari's description of a nervous system finding its right speed. He told it straight, in order, the way he told Max things, without simplifying, without editorializing. He respected his son enough to give him the full version, and had since the kitchen floor. Max listened without interrupting. He watched the road ahead of them the way he did when he was processing something seriously. Not zoned out, but turned inward, working. When Noah finished, the car was quiet for almost a full block. "She wants us to be part of it," Max said. "She wants you to have a say in whether we are." "That's different from asking." "Yeah, which is why I like her." Max was quiet again. Then, "What would it mean? For me?" "It would mean, maybe, if you wanted, talking to other kids, or to their parents, about what works, what helped you." Noah kept his eyes on the road. "You wouldn't have to do anything you didn't want to do. And if we started and it didn't feel right, we'd stop." "Would I get to say what the program actually does? Or would it just be like a photo op?" Noah looked at him briefly. "That's a good question. I'm going to make sure it's the first one." Max nodded slowly. He looked out the side window. "The paradiddle thing," he said. Noah blinked. "What?" "You said she looked up paradiddles, the mom." "She said it looked hard." Max was quiet for a second. Then something shifted slightly at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, but the structural intention of one. "It is hard," he said. "Most people don't know that." "I know." "Okay," Max said. "Okay, you want to be part of it? Or okay, you want to think about it?" "Okay, I want to meet her first. And if she's real, then okay, we're part of it." Noah exhaled. "Fair enough. I want to meet Ari, too. I'll see if that can happen." Not like a play date, just, Max searched for the right word. Like two people who have some things in common meeting each other. "I understand," Noah said. "I'll arrange it that way." Max picked up the backpack and held it in his lap. "Dad." "Yeah?"
"You showed up," Max said, "at the gala, when you could have just kept working."
Noah didn't say anything.
"That's the main thing," Max said, and looked back out the window.
Noah drove the rest of the way home with his jaw tight and his eyes steady on the road, and the feeling of something so full it had nowhere to go. The meeting with Della Chen happened 10 days later in a conference room at the Hargrove Foundation that was deliberately not at Solari Enterprises. Maya's idea, she'd said, because the program shouldn't live in the building where her company lived. It should have its own space, its own identity from the start. Della was 43, compact, fast-talking, with an energy that reminded Noah of a very organized fire. She'd read everything Maya had sent her ahead of the meeting and had come in with 7 pages of typed notes and a list of questions that she read out in order with the focused efficiency of someone who genuinely wanted to understand and had limited patience for circling around. Noah answered all 7 pages. Halfway through, Della stopped typing and just looked at him. "We've been running this program for 3 years, she said. 3 years. And the thing you just described, the transition warning system, the parent-to-parent handoff, the idea that the problem isn't the child and it isn't the family, it's the gap between the clinical knowledge and the kitchen table at 7 p.m. Nobody said it to me this clearly. In 3 years." "With respect," Noah said, "was anyone asking the right people?" Della looked at Maya. Maya said nothing, which was its own answer. "No," Della said. "We were not." She wrote something at the top of her notes, underlined it, and looked back up. "I want to start the pilot in 6 weeks. 3 family cohorts, 1 facilitator per cohort who's a peer parent, all sessions in community spaces, libraries, community centers, church halls, somewhere that doesn't have a foundation logo on the wall." She paused. "Will you be the first facilitator?" "I'm a janitor," Noah said, for the second time in 10 days. "I know your job," Della said. "I'm asking about your knowledge. Those are different things, and we are specifically in the business of the second one." He looked at Maya. "I told you," she said. "Della gets there fast." "6 weeks is tight," he said. 8 weeks, Della said immediately. "I'd want to design the session structure myself, with input from the other peer parents, not from the clinical team." Della opened her mouth. "The clinical team reviews it afterward," he said, "for safety, for gaps. But the first draft comes from us." Della closed her mouth, thought for 3 seconds. "Agreed." "And the families in the program give feedback after every session. Not a survey, a conversation. And that conversation changes what we do next." "That's just good program design," Della said. "I know. I want to make sure we actually do it." Della smiled for the first time. It was a very quick smile, but it was real. "I think you might be annoyingly good at this." "I've been a parent for 11 years, Noah said. "I've had practice being annoying." Maya, for the first time since Noah had met her in a room with other professionals, laughed. Not the controlled social laugh of the gala. A real one, brief and surprised and genuine,
And it changed her face the same way Noah's had changed in the Denny's corridor when he'd talked about Max and Darius. Della was already writing again. 8 weeks, she said. Let's build something real. The first Quiet Hearts session happened on a Tuesday evening in the back room of a public library branch on the south side of the city. 6 families, folding chairs arranged in a circle, not rows. A table with coffee and the kind of cookies that came in a plastic tray from a grocery store and that everyone always ate anyway. No agenda printed on letterhead. No PowerPoint. Just people. Noah opened it the way he'd decided to open it, after 8 weeks of thinking about it, by telling the birthday party story. The bouncy castle, the floor, running out of ideas, the rocking. He told it plain and straight and without the performance of vulnerability, the same way he'd told it to Maya in a Denny's booth. And when he was done, the room was quiet for a beat. And then a woman named Renata, mother of a 7-year-old named Isaiah, said very quietly, "That's my life. That's exactly my life. Every single week." And the conversation opened like a door that had been waiting a long time for someone to try the handle. For 2 hours, 6 families traded what they knew. Not clinical language, not research citations. The actual vocabulary of their actual lives. The specific songs that helped. The warning systems. The signal cards. The things they'd tried that hadn't worked, and the exact moment they'd figured out why. The things their kids had taught them that no book had mentioned. The moment each of them had stopped trying to make their child fit the world and started trying to understand the world their child already lived in. Noah didn't lead it so much as hold it. He asked questions when the conversation needed direction. He pulled threads when something important was being said too quietly to land fully. He noticed when someone was about to cry, and didn't make a thing of it, and didn't look away either. He noticed when someone was about to say something they'd never said out loud before. There was a particular quality to that kind of silence, he'd learned from Max, and he gave it room. At the end, a father named Gerald, who'd said almost nothing for the first 90 minutes, leaned forward in his chair and said, "Can I say something?" "Please," Noah said. "I've been to 4 different support groups, 3 different programs. I've sat in rooms with specialists, and I've sat in rooms with other parents, and I've read every book I could find." He paused. "Tonight is the first time I felt like I was in the right room." The room was quiet. "Why?" Noah asked. Because he needed to know. Not for the program. For himself. Gerald thought about it. "Because nobody in here is trying to fix my kid," he said. "Everybody in here is just trying to understand him. The way he actually is." He looked around the circle. "That's a different room than I've been in before." Noah nodded. He didn't say anything else. He let that sit where it needed to sit. After the session, when the families had trickled out and the chairs were being folded and the cookie tray was mostly empty, Della stood in the corner going through her notes. She'd sat against the wall the entire session without saying a word. Observer only, they'd agreed. And she'd been writing almost continuously. Noah was stacking chairs. "How many pages?" he asked. 14, she said. "Front and back." She looked up. "We need to run this in every branch, every community center, every school district we're in." She paused. "And we need more facilitators." "The other peer parents from tonight could do it," Noah said. "Renata especially. She has the instinct for it." "I know. I was watching her." Della looked at her notes again, then looked up. "You know this is going to grow, right? This thing. It's going to be bigger than 8 weeks." "I know. Are you ready for that?" He set down the last folding chair. Gerald said it was the first time he felt like he was in the right room. He looked at her. Yeah, I'm Revy. Ari and Max met for the first time on a Saturday morning at the community center where Max had his music program. Maya had asked, Noah had arranged it, and both children had been consulted and had agreed. Ari with her specific caveat that it not be called a playdate. Max with his specific condition that they meet somewhere he knew. They shook hands when they met, which neither Noah nor Maya had expected, and then Ari said, My mom told me about the paradiddle. And Max said, Do you want to see? And that was the end of any parental involvement in the interaction for the next hour and 40 minutes. Maya and Noah sat in folding chairs outside the rehearsal room and listened to the muffled sound of drumming. Uneven at first, then a rhythm emerging. Then Ari's voice saying something they couldn't quite hear. Then Max's voice explaining. Then drumming again. She's going to want a drum kit, Maya said. Probably. I'm going to pretend I didn't see this coming for at least another month. That's fair, Noah said. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. The kind they'd developed across 3 months of meetings and phone calls, and one more Denny's breakfast, and 2 sessions where Maya had sat against the wall like Della and watched and written things down. Quiet Hearts has a waiting list, Maya said. As of this week. Noah looked at her. How long? 47 families. She said it steadily, not with triumph. She didn't do triumph, he'd learned. She did next steps. Della wants to expand to 3 new facilitators by the end of the quarter. She's identified 2 candidates from the existing cohorts. Renata, he said. Renata, and a man from the Thursday group named Patrick. Patrick's good, Noah said. He's got Max's thing. The way of listening, where the other person can tell they're actually being heard. Della said the same thing, Maya paused. She also said something else. What? She said the program works because the person who designed it understands that the point isn't to help neurodivergent children fit into the world. The point is to help the world make room for them. She paused. She wanted me to tell you she was wrong, initially, about the 8 weeks. She thought it was too rushed. She now thinks the urgency was right. Tell her I was scared it would get too polished if we waited longer, Noah said. Polished things stop feeling real. I'll tell her. A beat. She knows. From behind the rehearsal room door, the drumming picked up. Steadier now, both of them finding a shared rhythm. Ari's timing slightly uncertain, but her commitment completely sure. Max holding the beat with the quiet authority of a kid who'd played every day for 2 years and knew in his body what he was doing. She's not bad, Noah said. She's going to be insufferable about this, Maya said. She's going to document it. There will be a folder. It will have subsections. Max will respect that. I know. That's what worries me. They're going to reinforce each other's most extreme organizational tendencies. Noah laughed. Again it was brief and genuine, and changed his face. Maya looked at him for a moment. Something easy in it. Not the weight of the gala. Not the careful measuring of the early conversations. Just 2 parents sitting outside a room where their kids were doing something good. Can I ask you something? She said. Go ahead.
The night at the gala, when I grabbed you.
She looked at the door, not at him, which told him this was something she'd been sitting with a while. You didn't push back. You stepped back. You let me move you. You kept your hands open. She paused. In front of all those people. Yeah, he said. Why? He was quiet for a moment. Because you were a mother who thought her daughter was in danger. And because making that moment about me would have made everything worse for Ari. He paused. And because I've been in enough rooms where me reacting would have ended the conversation permanently. He said it plainly, without anger, just the flat acknowledgement of a thing that was true about the world. I knew what mattered in that moment. It wasn't my ego. Maya was quiet for a long moment. "You had more grace in that moment than I did," she said. "You had more fear," he said. "They're not the same situation." Still, she looked at him directly. "I think about it. The things I didn't see. The people I moved past every morning and never looked at. I built a whole company on the idea that I see things clearly, and I was walking past you twice a day for 2 years and not seeing anything." "You see it now," he said. "I'm trying to." "That's enough," he said. "Trying counts." She nodded, and then, because she was who she looked back at the door and shifted into the next thing. "I want to talk to you about the spring expansion. Della wants to pitch the broader rollout to the Hargrove board in April, and she wants you in the room." "To say what?" "To say what you said to Gerald's group. What you said to me in a service corridor at 11 at night." She looked at him. "The real version. The birthday party floor, Max's playlist, the laminated card he designed himself and had you print and laminate." She paused. "People fund what they understand, and you make them understand it." "I'm still a janitor, Maya."
"I know," she said. "And you're also the person who built Quiet Hearts. Both things are true at the same time. You don't have to stop being one to be the other."
He thought about that. About the 11 years, the edges of rooms, the invisible infrastructure, the floors he kept clean for people who never thought about the floors. He thought about Max saying, "You show up every day," and meaning it in a way that went all the way down to the bone. He thought about Gerald saying, "The first time I felt like I was in the right room," and the quality of silence that had followed it. The specific kind of silence that meant something true had been said, and the room knew it. "Okay," he said. "I'll be in the room." "Good." The drumming behind the door reached something, a pattern, a real one. Both of them locked into the same rhythm now. Ari's uncertainty gone. Max's steadiness lifting them both into something that sounded, through the closed door, like confidence. Like two kids who'd found in each other someone running the same program. Like a call that had finally connected. Noah listened to his son play and thought about a man who had spent 11 years making himself invisible in rooms full of people who never noticed him, and who had stepped forward one night in a ballroom because a little girl had her hands over her ears and nobody was doing anything about it. And how that one step, not heroic, not planned, just a father who recognized what he was seeing, had pulled a thread that kept pulling, through a service corridor and a Denny's booth, and 8 weeks of building, and 47 families on a waiting list, and a room in a library where Gerald had finally felt like he was somewhere real. He thought about how none of it had started with a grand gesture. It had started with sitting down on a floor and doing the only thing he had left, which was matching his son's rhythm until the call connected. The smallest possible thing. And how it turned out, the smallest possible thing, done with full presence and complete love, was sometimes the thing that changed everything. The drumming found its peak and held it, both of them together, locked in, and then came down easy, and the room went quiet. A beat of silence. Then Ari's voice, clear and precise and deeply satisfied, came through the door. "I want to learn the paradiddle next." And Max's voice, steady and warm. "Then let's start." Noah Carter sat in a folding chair outside a rehearsal room on a Saturday morning, with a legal pad on his knee that he'd never stopped carrying, and he listened to his son teach a 9-year-old girl how to begin. And he understood that this, right here, this ordinary morning, This small and specific and irreplaceable moment was what everything had been for. Not the program, not the expansion,
Not the board meeting in April, or the 47 families on the waiting list, or whatever came after that. This. 2 kids in a room, finding the same rhythm. This was the whole point. This had always been the whole point. And the man who had spent 11 years invisible in the edges of other people's rooms sat in the full light of a Saturday morning and was, for the first time and longer than he could clearly name, completely, entirely, and exactly where he was supposed to be.